The flames roared like a monster from hell, tearing through the small apartment building at the edge of the city. People screamed, smoke filled the air, and chaos consumed the street. But through the thick black haze and desperate cries, one figure moved without hesitation. A thin woman in torn clothes, her face streaked with soot and tears. She had nothing in this world, not even a home, but at that moment she carried more courage than anyone else there. Her name was Lena Carter, a homeless woman who lived in the shadows of forgotten corners, surviving one day at a time. Yet that night, destiny called her by name. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. It helps us spread more stories that remind the world what it means to be human. Lena had been sleeping behind the grocery store dumpster when she first heard the screams. The fire had already eaten through half the building before anyone could react. The smell of burning rubber and wood, mixed with the desperate cries of a child, pierced her heart. Without a second thought, she ran toward the danger. People were shouting for her to stop, yelling that the building was about to collapse, but she didn't hear them. All she could hear was the faint, terrified voice of a little boy crying for his mother. Inside, the heat was suffocating, smoke clawed at her lungs, and her eyes burned as she stumbled through the hallway. "Where are you, sweetheart?" she whispered hoarsely, coughing hard. The cries came again, faint but close. She kicked open a half-burned door and saw a small boy, maybe 5 years old, curled up under a bed, trembling. His tiny hands covered his ears, and his face was streaked with ash and tears. Lena dropped to her knees, reaching under to pull him out. "It's okay, baby, I've got you," she rasped, wrapping her arms around him. She wrapped her old coat over his head to shield him from the sparks as she ran back. Through the burning hallway, a beam crashed behind them, showering sparks that bit at her skin. She screamed in pain but didn't stop. Step by step, she forced her way through the heat, her breath ragged, her heart pounding wildly. When she finally burst through the front door and out into the cold night air, the crowd gasped. Firefighters rushed forward, taking the boy from her arms, but Lena collapsed on the pavement, coughing uncontrollably. The world around her spun. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was the child's tiny hand reaching for hers. Hours later, Lena awoke in a hospital bed. Her face was blistered, her palms raw, and her clothes had been burned away. She didn't know how she got there. The nurse told her that she had been found unconscious and brought in by the fire crew. She asked about the boy immediately, her voice weak and broken. "He's safe," the nurse said softly. "You saved his life." Those words brought tears to Lena's eyes, tears of relief and gratitude. It had been years since she'd done something that truly mattered. Once, she had a job, a small apartment, and a husband who loved her. But when her husband died suddenly in a construction accident, everything spiraled out of control. Medical bills, grief, and debt stripped her of everything. She had no one left, no family, no savings, no home. Life had taken everything but her heart, and that heart, though scarred, still beat with love. She stayed in the hospital for 2 days. On the third morning, she slipped out quietly, still limping, with only a small blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She didn't want attention, praise, or pity. She just wanted to disappear again into the silence of the streets. She walked slowly toward the park where she usually slept, unaware that someone was already looking for her, someone powerful. The next morning, a black luxury car stopped near the burned building. From it stepped Ethan Monroe, one of the city's youngest and most successful CEOs, a man worth millions. His usually calm, composed face was pale with worry as he talked to the police and firefighters still investigating the scene. He held in his hands a small photo, a picture of his only son, Noah. Ethan had been away on a business trip when he received the call that changed everything. His housekeeper's apartment had caught fire, and Noah had been trapped inside. By the time rescuers arrived, a homeless woman had already carried him out. The firefighters told him she'd saved Noah's life, and then vanished. Ethan was a man who believed money could solve anything, but at that moment, money meant nothing. His little boy was alive because of someone who had nothing at all. He searched the hospital records, the fire department's reports, and even local shelters, but no one knew where she went. All he knew was her name, Lena Carter. Days passed, but Ethan refused to give up. He even put out a notice offering a reward for anyone who could find her, though he didn't realize that Lena, upon hearing it on a diner's radio, had quietly smiled and walked away. She didn't want money. She didn't want to be found. She had saved that child not for reward, but because she couldn't bear to see another innocent life lost when she had already lost so much. But fate has a way of bringing hearts together when they are meant to meet. A week later, as rain poured over the city, Ethan was driving through downtown when he spotted a woman sitting under a broken bus shelter, shivering and trying to light a small piece of cardboard for warmth. Something about her posture, her thin frame and gentle hands, pulled at his heart. He stopped the car and stepped out, the rain soaking his suit in seconds. When she looked up, their eyes met, and he froze. It was her. Her face was scarred from the fire, her clothes tattered, but her eyes, those soft, tired eyes, held the same quiet courage that had saved his son. "Lena?" he whispered. She blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. He knelt before her in the puddles, rain streaming down his face like tears. "You saved my boy," he said, his voice breaking. "You saved Noah." Lena smiled faintly, looking away. "He's safe. That's all that matters." But Ethan shook his head. "No, that's not all that matters. You matter." He insisted she come with him, but she refused at first. She didn't belong in his world, she said. She was just a nobody. Yet Ethan didn't listen. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders and led her to his car. For the first time in years, Lena sat inside a warm vehicle, the smell of leather and comfort overwhelming her. When they arrived at his mansion, she hesitated at the door. Everything felt too big, too bright, too far from the world she knew. But then she saw Noah running toward her, his little arms wide open. "Miss Lena!" he cried, throwing himself around her legs. The warmth of his hug melted every fear inside her. Tears filled her eyes as she knelt and hugged him back. From that day, Ethan made it his mission to change Lena's life. He arranged medical treatment for her burns, new clothes, and a safe place to stay. But more than that, he treated her with respect and kindness, the kind she hadn't felt in years. For weeks, she stayed at his guest house, recovering, slowly learning to smile again. Noah visited her every morning, bringing her drawings and little gifts, and every time she looked into his innocent eyes, she felt a piece of her broken heart heal. One evening, Ethan invited her to dinner. He had been distant that day, quiet and thoughtful. When she sat down, he looked at her with sincerity that made her chest tighten. "Lena," he said softly, "I know you didn't do what you did for money, but please let me help you rebuild your life." She tried to refuse again, but he continued. "You gave me back my world, let me give you back yours." He offered her a job at his company, not out of charity, but because he saw her strength and heart as qualities he wanted in his team. At first, she worked quietly, doing administrative tasks, keeping to herself. But as months passed, she bloomed. Her intelligence, humility, and warmth began to inspire everyone around her. She became more than just an employee. She became a light in that office, someone whose smile could ease even the hardest days. And Ethan found himself drawn to her in ways he never expected. He saw in her not just the woman who saved his son, but a soul that reminded him what truly mattered: compassion, humanity, and love. Slowly, gently, their bond grew. Months turned into a year. Lena had her own small apartment now, a steady income, and most of all, a family that loved her. Noah adored her like a second mother, and Ethan often found himself watching her with admiration he couldn't hide. On the anniversary of the fire, Ethan invited her to a small ceremony he organized in Noah's school. They lit candles for those who had suffered that day, and when it was time for him to speak, Ethan told everyone about the woman who had saved his son's life. The crowd stood silent as he shared how a homeless woman had run into fire when no one else dared to. "Courage doesn't wear a suit or live in a mansion," he said. "Sometimes it sleeps on cold streets, but carries the warmest heart in the world." When he turned to Lena, tears glistened in his eyes. "Thank you for saving my son." and for reminding me that humanity still exists." The room erupted in applause, but Lena just cried silently, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, because real kindness, no matter how small, can change someone's entire world. As the applause faded, Ethan leaned close and whispered, "You gave me my second chance. Now let me give you yours." She smiled, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Special request: what would you have done if you were in Lena's place? Comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lena stood on the mansion balcony, watching Noah play in the garden. The golden light danced across her face, and for the first time in a long, long while, she felt peace. She wasn't the homeless woman the world ignored anymore. She was proof that kindness, no matter how lost or forgotten, always finds its way home. And sometimes, when you save someone's life, you end up saving your own.